What happens when a kind-hearted man, who gave his family a dream home for a steal, finds out they're trying to flip it for profit? He doesn't argue, he doesn't plead, he just builds a fence and prepares to unleash 100 pigs. This is how one man reclaimed his land with bacon, boundaries, and a silent warning. You know that one person in your family who just grinds, doesn't complain, doesn't expect handouts, just rolls up their sleeves and figures life out. That's my brother. He's adopted, but don't let that fool you into thinking he was ever treated differently. In fact, he probably had it harder than the rest of us. But instead of letting it drag him down, he turned it into fuel. When he was younger, everything he had he earned. No shortcuts, no free rides. And when life threw curveballs like serious medical issues right as he was starting his own family, he didn't crumble. He tightened his belt, squared his shoulders, and got to work. He was living paycheck to paycheck. But even then, he had this unshakable vision. He wasn't just working to survive, he was building something. My dad, recognizing his drive, sold him a piece of land. Not gifted, sold still. It was a gesture of support. And my brother, being who he is, didn't waste a second. With almost no money, he started building a house. Literally himself, half a house, to be exact, because that's all he could afford at first. While most people were out grabbing drinks on weekends or scrolling through their phones, he was hauling materials, pouring sweat into the foundation of his dream brick by back-breaking brick. But he wasn't just building walls, he was building equity. That half a house became a bargaining chip. He fought tooth and nail with a bank to get a second loan and finish the project. You ever try negotiating with a bank when your credit not pristine and your budget held together with duct tape and prayers? It's like trying to win a boxing match with one hand tied behind your back. But he did it. And once it was finished, he didn't just settle. That house became a stepping stone. He flipped it, sold it at a profit. Finally, a win after years of struggle. But instead of splurging on vacations or flashy cars, he did what only someone with a bigger vision would do. He bought land. A lot of land. We're talking 175 acres out in the Midwest. Prime rural property. Good for hunting, good for farming, good for someone who just wants to breathe and build and live without anyone watching over his shoulder. And that's exactly what he started doing. He hunted, he farmed, and he made improvements to the old house that came with the land. But deep down he knew that wasn't the final stop. The house was fine, but not right. Not for what he wanted for his family. So he started again. House number 3. At this point, most people would be burned out, but not him. Every 2x4, every nail, every late night with a flashlight in one hand and a hammer in the other, it was all part of his plan. And finally, after all the setbacks, after all the grinding and grit, he had a home he was proud of. You'd think the story ends there. That the guy who came from nothing, who fought for every inch, finally gets to sit back and enjoy his life. But no, because success doesn't just attract admiration, it also attracts jealousy. And that's where the real story begins. Now picture this. A guy, just barely out of financial quicksand, standing in front of a half-built house with a toddler on his hip and a second job lined up for the weekends. Most people would call that madness. My brother called it momentum. That half a house, it became his ticket to something bigger. He lived in it as he built it, turning lumber into shelter, turning sweat into square footage. No contractors, no fancy crews, just him, some tools, and the will to make things better for his family. And yeah, it wasn't pretty at first. Rain leaked through unfinished corners. Winter was brutal without full insulation. But he pushed through it like a man with blinders on. No distraction, just purpose. And then finally he had a home. One built not just with wood and nails, but with pure determination. He knew what it meant. That house wasn't just a roof over his head, it was leverage. And he used it smartly. Took the equity, negotiated a second loan, something he had to fight the bank tooth and nail for, and built it out completely. When it was done, it wasn't just livable, it was valuable. And he sold it at a profit. Not some massive windfall, but enough. Enough to go from just getting by to finally having some breathing room. Enough to stop renting life and start owning it. That's when he saw the listing: 175 acres of wild, beautiful land out in the Midwest. The kind of land that whispers to the part of you that wants space, quiet, and freedom. A little overgrown, a little rough around the edges, but it was perfect for him, because he didn't need polished, he needed potential. So he bought it, all of it. And when people heard about it, jaws dropped. How'd a guy with nothing manage to lock down that much land? Simple. He outworked everybody else. While others hesitated, he planned. While they spent, he invested. And while they doubted him, he was already 3 steps ahead. The property came with an old house, nothing fancy. Kind of a fixer-upper, but not a total wreck. He moved in, rolled up his sleeves again, and got to work making it livable. He redid the wiring, fixed the plumbing, rebuilt parts of the porch, even repainted the inside himself. And it was good for a while. But if you've followed the story so far, you know my brother doesn't settle for good enough. The house worked, sure, but it wasn't the dream. And after all he'd been through, he deserved the dream. So he started again, house number 3. This time, he knew exactly what he wanted. Bigger kitchen, room for his kids to run wild. A real workshop, not just a corner of a cluttered garage. He planned it all out, every beam, every tile, every doorknob. He'd earned the right to be picky. And he built it, right there on the same land. When it was done, it was beautiful. Function or his, he didn't need to flip it or show it off on Instagram. He just wanted to live in peace, hunt in the backwoods, grow some crops, and raise his kids with clean air and no drama. But there was still that other house, the one he'd renovated. It wasn't ideal for him anymore, but it wasn't trash either. In fact, it was in pretty great shape after all his improvements, so naturally he put it up for sale. Made sense, right? Get some money back, let someone else enjoy the fruits of his labor. And that's when the knock came at his door. A family member, someone who'd watched his whole journey unfold, stepped forward. Said they were struggling, wanted a better place for their family, but couldn't afford much. They'd seen the house was up for sale and asked, would he consider selling it to them? Now, my brother's a lot of things, tough, stubborn, sharp, but above all, he's loyal, especially to family. He could remember those hard days, the ones where you check the grocery bill 5 times because you're $6 short. He'd lived that. So, yeah, he said yes. He sold them the house for way less than it was worth. Way less. Not because he needed to, because he wanted to help. And they knew what kind of gift they were getting. A fully renovated home in the middle of prime rural land for basically half its value. He even worked with the bank to make sure they could get the loan. Everything about the deal was soaked in trust. For my brother, it wasn't about the money. It was about giving someone else a leg up, just like he once needed. It was about paying it forward. It was about family. But what he didn't know, what none of us knew, is that family doesn't always mean loyalty. Sometimes it just means opportunity. You ever give someone a hand and feel good about it? Like genuinely proud that you could be the one to help. That's how my brother felt the day he sold that house to our family member. There was no bitterness, no reluctance. Just quiet satisfaction that all his hard work could now give someone else a fighting chance. Let's rewind for a second. It was his house, the one he brought back from the dead, the one he rewired, replumbed, repainted, and poured his energy into after days of real work and nights of no sleep. It was a home with blood, sweat, and drywall dust mixed into the walls. When that relative came asking, my brother didn't hesitate. Yeah, they could only afford about half of what the house was worth. And yeah, he could have sold it on the open market for double without blinking. But this wasn't about business. This was family. So he knocked the price down, not a couple $1,000s, but tens of thousands, a life-changing discount. He practically handed them the deed with a bow on top. And it wasn't just out of generosity, it was out of empathy, because he remembered what it felt like to struggle, to beg a bank for a shot, to pray that the pipes didn't burst in the middle of winter, because there was no money to fix them. He knew the look in their eyes because he'd seen it in the mirror once. So he gave them what he never had, a running start. Now here's the kicker, he didn't have to do that. No one would have faulted him for saying no. No one would have blamed him for choosing market value over mercy. But he's not that guy. He'd rather have peace in his heart than a few extra zeros in his bank account. And when the deal went through, you could see it on his face, relief, pride, like he'd done the right thing. The deed transferred, keys handed over, smiles all around. The family members moved in and started settling down. They told him how grateful they were, how much it meant to them, how they'd never forget this kindness. And for a while, everything seemed fine. He drove by a couple times just out of the curiosity, to check on the place, see how they were doing, maybe drop off some extra tools or tips on the well system. He wasn't trying to be overbearing, he just cared. But then, one day, something changed. He's driving past the property when something catches his eye. A sign, big, bold, unmistakable, stuck right there in the front yard like a punch to the gut. For sale. At first he thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe someone planted it there as a joke. Maybe they were just considering refinancing. Anything other than what it looked like. So he pulls over, gets out, walks up to the door, knocks. The husband answers, all casual like nothing's off. Oh yeah, he says, we're thinking of moving. looking for something closer to town. The house is great, but we're just not really feeling the location. Not feeling the location. My brother stood there, stunned, not angry, not yelling, just stunned. This wasn't some random buyer flipping a property. This was family. People who got a once-in-a-lifetime deal. Not because they deserved it, but because someone believed in them. People who said thank you with smiles and hugs only to turn around and try to cash out his kindness like it was a lottery ticket. So he says, calmly but firmly, "Look, I gave you that deal because you're family. If you're going to sell the house, I'd appreciate it if you'd sell it back to me for the price I sold it to you for." He didn't ask for profit. He didn't ask for market value. Just a clean reversal, a respectful undoing of a deal made in good faith. But the husband, he just shrugs, says he'll think about it, which, let's be real, is code for no. He closes the door, leaving my brother standing there on the porch of the house he built with his own hands, a house that had become a pawn in someone else's money game. Now, I want you to sit with that feeling. Imagine what it's like to give someone a gift from the deepest part of your heart, something that cost you time, effort and love, and to watch them slap a price tag on it the minute your back is turned. That's not just betrayal, that's a spit in the face. But here's the thing about my brother. He doesn't explode, he doesn't scream, he doesn't get petty. He plans, he thinks, he calculates. This is a guy who oversees massive infrastructure projects for a living. Highways, things you probably drive over without realizing it. He deals in blueprints and logistics. Problem solving is in his DNA. And now, this wasn't just a house deal gone sideways. This was a problem. A solvable one. So he goes home, doesn't call them, doesn't argue, just thinks. And the next morning, he loads up his truck. Betrayal doesn't always come with yelling or slammed doors. Sometimes, it shows up on a sign stuck in the dirt, black letters on white plastic, waving in the wind like a flag of disrespect. When my brother saw that for sale sign, it didn't feel like a business move. It felt like a knife. Clean, silent, and straight to the back. He stood there longer than he probably needed to. Just staring. The grass he once mowed, the porch he once repaired, the very soil he'd toiled on it was all for sale. Not two strangers, but by family. Family who'd cried poor. Family who'd leaned on his shoulder and promised they'd honor the blessing he gave them. And now, they were trying to turn his goodwill into cold, hard profit. Let me be clear, this wasn't just about money. If he wanted to make a profit, he could have easily sold the house to someone else months ago. But he didn't. He went out of his way to help. Because that's who he is. Because he believed in the idea that when one of us makes it, we all rise together. But clearly, not everyone shares that code. After the husband brushed him off, my brother walked back to his truck with a different kind of silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that builds into something. The kind that doesn't make noise because it's thinking. He didn't vent. He didn't send angry texts or rants to the group chat. He just went home, made a cup of coffee, sat down and started planning. You see, most people when they're betrayed, they act emotionally. They lash out, burn bridges, or get dramatic. But not my brother. He's methodical. That's what makes him dangerous in situations like this. He doesn't let emotion cloud the mission. He just switches gears. And what he came up with, it wasn't violent. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't even that loud. It was perfectly legal and perfectly petty. The kind of move that doesn't just teach a lesson, it engraves it in stone. The very next morning he loaded up his pickup with fence posts. Not your average backyard kind. We're talking hog fence thick, strong, and meant to keep big animals in and everything else out. He'd already mapped out the land in his head, knew exactly where his property lines were, knew exactly how to build what he was about to build without crossing a single inch into their side. He pulled up to the edge of the property, just beyond where their backyard ended. The same property he still owned because while he sold them the house and a little land around it, he kept everything else, especially the hunting fields around it. The ones that were now, conveniently, about to become a pig paradise. The sun wasn't even fully up when the hammering started. One fence post after another going into the earth. Methodical, rhythmic, unstoppable. A few hours in, the husband finally walks out. What's going on? My brother wipes some sweat off his brow and answers calmly. Just putting in some hog fence. The husband blinks. Confused hogs. Yeah, my brother nods. I've got about 100 lined up from a farm down the road. Gonna bring 'em in next week. You're putting pigs out here? Yep, all on my land. Dante Warrior LL put a gate in for you guys so you can still get in and out. Now let me paint this picture clearly. Living next to a hog farm isn't just inconvenient, it's a sensory nightmare. The noise, the smell, the flies, the destruction. These aren't Disney pigs. They're heavy, loud, rooting machines that turn nice yards into muddy war zones. If you're trying to sell a house, having a pig pen next door is like putting a landfill behind a bakery. The husband stammered a bit, asked if it was necessary, said something about property values. My brother just smiled, friendly as ever. It's all on my land, he repeated. I can do whatever I want with it, right? The husband knew he was beat, but he didn't walk away. He went back inside. Now imagine the conversation that happened behind those closed doors. The wife probably yelling, "I told you not to mess with him." The realization sinking in that their master plan to flip the house for easy cash was about to turn into a hard lesson in consequences. The next morning there was no hammering, no pigs. Instead there was a meeting at the bank, deed in hand, title transferred, sale reversed, just like that. No threats, no screaming, no lawsuits, just the quiet, undeniable pressure of a man who knew how to handle business and wasn't afraid to use a few pigs to prove a point. There's something eerie about quiet anger. Not the shouting, door-slamming kind, but the kind that simmers just beneath the surface, measured and steady. That's the kind of anger my brother carried after he walked away from their doorstep that day. And that's the kind of anger that brews the best revenge. He didn't go home raging. He didn't call anyone to vent or ask for advice. He just sat, stared out at the land he still owned. The trees, the open field, the dirt he once broke with a shovel and a dream. His property's rules. And now his move. See, my brother doesn't play checkers, he plays chess. And this betrayal, this was just another problem to solve. And he'd solved a bigger. He's managed crews building bridges over rivers that would swallow you whole. He's dealt with high-pressure contracts where one miscalculation could shut down an entire highway. Compared to that, a couple of greedy family members trying to flip his goodwill for profit. That was child's play. So he started thinking, what est the cleanest way to shut this down without saying a single harsh word? That's when the idea hit. Not like a bolt of lightning, but like a gear finally clicking into place. He didn't need lawyers. He didn't need revenge through the court system. What he needed was pigs. Now, this wasn't some wild prank or spur-of-the-moment joke. This was rural brilliance. In the Midwest, pigs aren't pets. They're livestock. And hogs are a whole different level. Loud, filthy, destructive. The kind of animals that chew up a landscape faster than a demolition crew and antique hair if there's a white picket fence nearby. They do what pigs do, eat root and stink up everything in their path. But here's the genius part. The house he sold them didn't sit in the middle of their own private estate. It was a postage stamp on a much larger plot. His plot. He had kept most of the land, especially the area surrounding the house, enough acreage to circle that home like a moat of manure. So he picked up his phone and made a call to a farmer down the road. "Still got those feeder pigs?" he asked. "100 of them," the farmer replied. "Hold them for me. I might be putting them to work." He spent the rest of the day collecting materials, fence posts, wire mesh, gates, feeders. He even mapped out the wind direction because if you're gone, not drop a pig bomb on someone in his backyard, you want the breeze working with you. And he waited. He wanted them to know it was coming. That was part of the plan. You don't just spring the trap, you let them see it being built. Fence post by fence post, a warning with every thunk into the soil. He loaded the truck, not with anger, but with precision, measured spacing, clean lines. If someone drove by, they'd assume he was just building a new pen for livestock, nothing illegal, nothing questionable, just a farmer using this land for what land is for. But behind those calm preparations, he was sending a message. You tried to treat my generosity like a lottery ticket. You wanted a profit off my sacrifice. Okay, now you get to live next to 100 pigs. He didn't need to say a word. Every move he made was a sentence, every nail in the post a punctuation mark. And when the husband came out and asked what was going on, my brother didn't blink. "Just putting up hog fence," he said. "Don't worry, it's all on my land. I'll even put in a gate so you can get through." It was polite, direct, icy. And let me tell you something, there is a specific kind of fear that hits when you realize the other guy is not bluffing. When he's not yelling, not threatening, just building.com/intentional. Like a general preparing for war without ever raising his voice. The husband stood there for a minute, probably trying to process what kind of nightmare scenario was about to unfold. Because once those pigs arrived, resale value, gong, open house tours, cancelled. No one wants to buy a home where the backyard smells like a hog pen, and the flies have a 5-person head start on every showing. And that was just the beginning, because pigs don't care about property lines. They dig, they root, they escape. And once they're out, it's not your problem, it's your neighbor's. Legally, Sure, you can fence them back in. Morally, it's a stink bomb that doesn't come off. The husband didn't say much, just mumbled something about needing to talk to his wife. My brother nodded, still polite, still smiling, and went back to work. He didn't need to finish the fence. He didn't even need to bring in the pigs, because the trap had already been sprung. They saw what was coming. They saw it in the fence. In his eyes, in the chilling calm of a man who knew he didn't have to raise his voice to win. The plot had brewed, now it was boiling. By the time my brother pounded the 10th fence post into the ground, it was impossible to ignore this wasn't just some weekend farm project. This was a warning. And the funniest part, it was perfectly legal. When the husband came out that morning, he didn't shout, he didn't accuse, he just stood there, confused, as my brother kept working, sun beating down, metal clanging, post by post, calm/collected, relentless. He finally spoke. "You're building a fence." My brother, pausing just long enough to acknowledge him, nodded. "Yup, hog fence." The guy blinked. "You're putting hogs out here." My brother barely looked up. "About 100 of them. Got a line on a solid group from a farmer up the road." "Good deal." 2. A beat of silence passed. The husband looked out at the land surrounding their home. Land they didn't know. Land that wrapped around their slice of property like a waiting storm. "Right here." My brother smiled, pointed to the ground with the end of a fence post. "All this is mine. You can check the plat if you want. I'm staying clear of your boundary markers. Just going around your lot and building myself a nice little setup. I'll even put in a gate so you've got access. Wouldn't want you to feel boxed in." It sounded generous, it sounded polite. But make no mistake, it was a threat wrapped in Midwestern charm. Like offering someone a seat on a lifeboat after setting their ship on fire. "Now, unless you've lived next to a hog pen, let me break it down for you. Pigs are not quiet animals. They squeal. Loud. Constant. And it's not cute, it's piercing. The kind of noise that wakes you up at 3 a.m. and makes you wonder if someone is being tortured. And the smell, it's not just farm air. It's thick, wet, and clings to your clothes. It seeps into your walls, into your dreams. Then there's the flies. Swarms of them. They coat the windows. They buzz in your face when you step outside. They find any crack in your home and settle in. And that's not even mentioning what hogs do to land. What used to be grass becomes mud-deep, sticky, chewed-up mud. The kind that swallows boots and kills property value. So when my brother said he was putting in hog fence, what he really meant was, this is your last chance. Because once those pigs arrived, game over. There's no walking that back. No apologies that clean up that mess. But here's the real kicker. My brother never once raised his voice. He never threatened. He never even asked them to sell the house back. Not anymore. He simply exercised his rights as a landowner, a man who knew the terrain, the rules, and the power of silence. After that first conversation, the husband didn't come back out, but my brother kept working. All day. Sun up to sundown, laying out wire, digging post holes, measuring twice, cutting once, like a man on a mission. And neighbors started to notice. A few waved, a few looked confused. One even stopped by to ask what he was doing. "Building a hog pen," he replied. "For what hogs?" he said, smiling. "Gonna bring in about 100. Need to use the land for something." The word started spreading. And you know how rural communities are, nothing stays quiet. By that evening, the family inside that house knew exactly what was happening. And more importantly, what could happen. Inside that home, I guarantee you the tone had changed. What started as a plan to cash in on a family discount had turned into a nightmare scenario. Whatever profit they were dreaming of from flipping the house, it was turning to smoke, because no one in their right mind was buying a property surrounded by a hog farm. But my brother didn't stop. He had everything lined up. Delivery from the farmer was scheduled. Feed had been arranged. Troughs were in his truck bed. He even had a timeline written out for where the pigs would rotate across the land to keep them healthy and the soil from becoming unusable too fast. He meant business, and that was the point. The next day the fence was almost halfway done when the wife came out. She was less angry than defeated. She didn't even try to make small talk. She just stood there for a minute, watching him work. Finally, she said, "We didn't mean to take advantage." He stopped hammering. He turned, slow and steady, looked her in the eye. "But you did." She nodded. No excuses, no fake tears, just silence. And that, right there, was all the closure he needed. That afternoon, they made some phone calls. By sunset, they'd called the bank. The next morning, they were sitting across a desk from my brother, pen in hand, transferring the deed back. They didn't argue about the price. They didn't ask for extra. They didn't even try to delay. They folded, and as soon as that last signature dried, my brother nodded, stood up, shook hands like a gentleman, and left. No pigs needed, but a fence, so he left part of it up. Just enough to remind them, just enough to make sure the lesson stuck, because some people need courtrooms, some need revenge movies. My brother, he just needs a fence and a farmer with 100 pigs on standby. You ever hear the phrase, the calm before the storm? That's what it felt like after my brother started building the fence. Because while he worked in silence, the air was electric charged with tension and unspoken dread. He didn't have to say it out loud, but the message was clear enough. The hogs are coming. And here's the thing, he wasn't bluffing. He had a farmer on speed dial ready to deliver a full-blown pig parade. Not 10, not 20, 100, all fat, loud, and happy to trample whatever stood in their way. These weren't pets. These were full-scale property value assassins. But before we get to how close they came to rolling in, let's talk logistics, because this wasn't just a wild idea. This was a masterstroke in revenge engineering. The pigs had already been selected feeder pigs. Mostly easy to maintain, hearty enough for outdoor living, and cheap. He'd scoped out feed suppliers, set up bulk delivery pricing, and even mapped out a rotation schedule to protect soil health. If they thought he was just posturing, they weren't paying attention. This was real, and it was brilliant. Now, pigs aren't just loud and dirty, they're strategic weapons. Their smell carries for miles, especially in summer. They scream bloody murder when they're hungry. They destroy everything. Fences, yards, trees, and worst of all for the family trying to flip the house. The minute they're within sniffing range, your open house dreams are toast. No one is buying a charming country home when it sounds like a slaughterhouse outside and the stench slaps you in the face as soon as you open the car door. And my brother knew it. He planned to install hog wallows, those mud pits pigs love to roll in just downhill from the property. So when it rained, yeah, that runoff wasn't going away from the house. It was creeping toward. It's straight into the yard, into the soil, into their lives. Even if the pigs weren't directly on their land, the impact would be. But here's the part that really twisted the knife. Everything he was doing, it was completely within his rights. The land was zoned for agriculture. There were no HOA rules, no city ordinances to stop him. This wasn't suburbia, this was the Midwest. You don't like the smell, move. That's the reality of rural life. You've got chickens crowing at dawn, cows mooing through the night, and yes, sometimes 100 pigs living next door. Legally, they couldn't say a word, but emotionally, psychologically, they were unraveling. Word spread fast. People in town heard about it. Some found it hilarious. Others said it was poetic justice. A few even drove by just to see the fence being built. One neighbor, a guy from 3 properties over, actually pulled over and asked, "You really bringing in pigs?" My brother just smiled. "Yup, time to put the land to good use." The neighbor chuckled, shook his head, and drove off. Because out here, revenge doesn't always come with shouting, it comes with livestock. Back at the house, I imagine things were unraveling. Imagine standing at your kitchen sink, trying to plan a house showing, while outside your window, someone is literally constructing your worst nightmare. Imagine explaining to a potential buyer that yes, the property smells a bit ripe today, but that's just the neighbor's pigs. And the kicker, they didn't even know when the hogs were arriving. My brother had everything ready, but he didn't pull the trigger right away. No delivery trucks, no squealing cargo, just silence and a nearly finished pen. It was psychological warfare. Every hour that passed was a coin flip. Are the pigs coming now? Today? Tomorrow? Are they even coming at all? Or is this just a threat? But that's what made it brilliant. The uncertainty was the real weapon. Because humans can't handle and we can survive hardship. But not knowing, that's what breaks people. My brother just kept showing up, kept hammering, kept smiling, until the phone rang. It was them, no lawyers, no just a short, tired call to say they wanted to talk. In person they knew they were outmatched. Not financially, not legally, but morally. Because what do you say to someone who gave you everything and who can now, legally and with full rule authority, turn your life into a pig-infested nightmare? You say, "Uncle," and that's exactly what they did. They met at the bank, quiet, tense. Not a lot of words exchanged, just paperwork, signatures, and the cold realization that they'd played the game and lost. They handed the deed back. He handed the idea of the hogs to history, no pigs needed. But here's the kicker, those hogs, still available. He didn't cancel the order, just put it on hold. Because some fences are physical, and some are reminders. And just knowing the pigs were almost there, that was enough to keep the peace from then on. The day they met at the bank, the air wasn't just tense, it was thick. Not with noise or chaos, but with quiet, heavy realization. The kind that weighs on your chest and makes your signature feel like a confession. My brother walked in like a man clocking in for work. .com/focused unshaken. He didn't gloat, didn't strut. That wasn't his style. But if you looked close enough, there was a spark in his eyes, the silent satisfaction of a man who just outplayed the very people who tried to cheat him. Across the lobby, the couple sat waiting, not quite making eye contact, not holding hands. That fake sense of unity they had when they first pitched the idea to buy the house. Gone now. It was just two people silently stewing in regret, realizing they underestimated the wrong man. A bank officer greeted them all, chipper and oblivious to the tension. Here to process the title transfer. My brother nodded. The husband gave a tight smile. The wife just looked away. They were there to undo the mess they made, to reverse the betrayal without a single word of apology. And that's what made this scene so I see it. Wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was just surgical. Paperwork slid across the desk. The bank officer explained everything like it was a normal transaction. But we all knew it wasn't. This wasn't just real estate. This was reputation, respect, and family dynamics being rewritten right there on a clipboard. When it was time to sign, the husband's hand hesitated, just for a second, like he wanted to protest, like he might still try to twist the knife one last time, but he didn't. He signed. The wife did too, and then it was my brother's turn. Steady hand. No hesitation, signature clean, sharp, and final. And with that, it was done. The house, the one he'd built, repaired, poured his soul into Wass's again. The land stayed his, the peace of mind, restored. Now here's where most people would expect a victory speech. Some "I told you so," maybe a smug smile, or a parting shot like, "Hope the pigs taught you something." But my brother, he just stood up. He looked them both in the eyes, but with that unmistakable edge of someone who's been crossed and came out stronger for it. "You know why this happened," he said, voice low and steady. "You made a choice, and now we're just correcting it. No venom, no flair, just facts." And then he turned and walked out. That was it. No fireworks, no revenge montage, just a quiet, devastating reminder that respect once lost is damn near impossible to earn back. He didn't need to say another word, because the message was already written into every board of that fence, every pig he almost deployed, every moment he spent planning a response that was smarter than yelling and cleaner than war. As he walked out of the bank, the weight lifted, not just from the deal, but from the principle of it all, because now he had his property, his peace, his power, and they walked out with nothing but the memory of a deal they should have honored, and the regret of thinking they could outmaneuver the man who gave them everything. Back home, the hog fencing sat untouched for a few days, just resting there, a monument to the revenge that almost happened. My brother left it up for a while, not because he needed it anymore, but because it made a point. Everyone in town heard what happened, not because he told them, but because fences like that talk louder than gossip. They say, "I can be generous, but I can also remind you why you shouldn't test me." And now, anytime someone drives by that stretch of land and sees the old hog post still standing, they remember. They remember what almost happened, and they remember who they're dealing with. Revenge doesn't always come served hot. Sometimes it simmers, slow, satisfying, with just enough heat to remind you that peppercorn done right tastes better cold, and maybe just a little like bacon. After the bank meeting, my brother didn't celebrate. He didn't throw a party or post about it. He just went home, looked out over his land, and smiled the way a man does when balance has been restored. Justice had been served, not in a courtroom, not with shouting matches or family blow-ups, but with planning, patience, and just the threat of pigs. That's the beauty of it. He didn't have to follow through. He didn't even have to bring in a single hog, because the moment they realized he could, was the moment they backed down. And that, right there, is the kind of power most people never learn how to use. You see, revenge doesn't always look like vengeance. Sometimes, it looks like a quiet man standing in a field, measuring fence posts. Sometimes, it looks like livestock logistics and zoning laws. And sometimes, it looks like a family realizing too late that they tried to play chess with someone who built the board themselves. That fence he built, he never took it down, didn't need to. It stood there, a physical reminder, not just to the ones who betrayed him, but to anyone who ever drove past that stretch of land and wondered what the story was. It was more than steel and wire. It was a message. Don't mess with the guy who builds bridges for a living. Not just literal bridges, ones that carry weight and cars and responsibility, but figurative ones too. Emotional ones, family ones, the kind you build when you sell someone a house for half its worth, just because you believe in them. He builds bridges, and he knows exactly when to let them burn. People in town talked. Oh, they didn't come out and say it, but you could feel it in the way they nodded at him in the hardware store, or waved just a bit longer when they passed him on the road. They knew, they respected it, because out here, in places where reputation travels faster than cell service, that kind of justice means something. You don't need to scream to be heard. You just need to move with intention, and maybe threaten someone with 100 pigs if they forget who helped them up. But let's talk about the pigs one last time, because even though they never showed up, they were the main characters in this whole saga. They were the warning, the wait, the wild card. They were his ace in the hole. And truth be told, he almost brought them in anyway. Just to make a point, just to finish what he started, not out of spite but out of principle, because the plan was beautiful, elegant, a perfect blend of strategy and country wisdom. In the end, he didn't need to. He'd already won. And those pigs, they lived their lives somewhere else, blissfully unaware that they were once part of a revenge plan that Kaveh turned a real estate deal into a living nightmare. So your justice was served. And the lesson, don't mistake kindness for stupidity. Don't think generosity comes without boundaries. And never, ever, cross someone who knows how to use land, law, and livestock to teach you a lesson you'll never forget. Because while my brother never had to deploy the hogs, the idea of them changed everything. And in the story of rural revenge, that's the stuff legends are made of. So what did we learn? Sometimes, revenge doesn't look like a fight. It looks like a fence, a blueprint, 100 pigs that never had to show up, because the fear of them did all the work. It looks like OneMan.com and Collected, who reminded everyone that loyalty has limits and generosity doesn't mean weakness. My brother didn't raise his voice. He didn't beg them to do the right thing. He just showed them what could happen if they didn't, and when they backed down, he didn't gloat. He didn't rub it in. He just took back what was his and moved on. That's the kind of revenge that lasts, because it didn't just fix the situation, it changed it. It reminded people that trust is a two-way street, and when you abuse someone's grace, they might not yell, but they'll respond. And that response, it might just come with a gate, a trough, and a whole lot of squealing. This story wasn't about real estate or pigs or even profit. It was about principle. It was about family, respect, and the line you don't cross. Because if you do, don't be surprised when the guy who helped you rise becomes the one who fences you in. Now, let me ask you something. What would you have done? Would you have taken the high road, gone legal, let it slide? Or would you have brought in the hogs? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to hear your revenge style. And hey, if this story hit you in the gut, made you laugh, or reminded you of someone you know, go ahead and smash that like button. Subscribe for more stories like this, real ones, raw ones, the kind you can't make up. Because around here, we don't do fake drama. We do justice, one fence at a time. Kindness isn't weakness, but when it's betrayed, it becomes strength. My brother didn't need lawyers or fists. He just needed fence posts. And the promise of pigs. If you enjoyed this ride, hit like, subscribe for more real justice stories, and tell us what would you have done.